Close your eyes. Listen. Can you hear it? The rumble of Ford Model T engines, the clang of streetcar bells, the distant wail of a jazz trumpet drifting from a smoky speakeasy. This is America in the 1920s, the Roaring Twenties, a decade that didn't just look different, it sounded completely different. Today, we're stepping into a sonic time machine. We're going to resurrect the forgotten soundscape of a bustling American city nearly a century ago. These aren't just sounds, they're the heartbeat of an era, the rhythm of daily life that our great-grandparents knew by heart, but that has almost completely vanished from our modern world. What you're about to hear are authentic recordings, painstakingly preserved and restored, mixed with historically accurate recreations. From the crack of dawn to the deep of night, we'll walk these streets together. We'll hear the city wake up, work, play, and finally sleep. So adjust your headphones, turn up the volume, and prepare to be transported back 100 years to a world that was electric, alive, and utterly unforgettable. This is Unearthing Forgotten Sounds, a 1920s bustling American city. It's 5:30 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in 1925. The city is just beginning to stir. The first sound you hear is something almost alien to modern ears, the clip-clop of horse hooves on cobblestone streets. Despite the automobile revolution, horses still ruled the early morning hours. Milkmen made their rounds in horse-drawn wagons, glass bottles clinking in wooden crates. Listen to that rhythmic sound, that gentle percussion of glass on wood, accompanied by the steady four-beat gait of the horse. There's the street sweeper, pushing his cart, bristles scraping against stone. In 1920s America, these men started their shifts before dawn, clearing away the previous day's debris, horse droppings, and litter. Now, listen carefully. That low rumble in the distance, that's a streetcar, one of the first of the morning, its steel wheels grinding against steel rails, throwing sparks in the pre-dawn darkness. The electric motors whine and hum, a sound that was still relatively new to American cities. And there, cutting through it all, is the factory whistle, sharp, insistent, calling thousands of workers to the morning shift. In industrial cities like Pittsburgh, Detroit, or Chicago, multiple whistles would sound across the city, each factory adding its voice to the urban symphony. Men and women in caps and simple clothing would flood the streets, their footsteps creating a rushing sound like a river of humanity. By 7 a.m., the city has exploded into full activity. The soundscape becomes a controlled chaos that would be both familiar and strange to modern ears. First, the automobiles. The Ford Model T dominated American streets in the 1920s, but its engine didn't purr like modern cars. It rattled, coughed, and sputtered. The four-cylinder engine created a distinct put-put-put sound. Imagine dozens of these on a single street, each one slightly out of sync, creating a mechanical symphony that's both charming and cacophonous. Listen to the horns. In the 1920s, car horns were actual bulb horns or mechanical klaxons, producing sounds ranging from polite ah-ooh-ga to aggressive bleats and honks. There was no standardization, so every car had its own voice. And there, in the middle of the intersection, is the traffic cop. Before electric traffic lights became common, these men stood on raised platforms, blowing whistles sharp and shrill, directing the flow of cars, streetcars, and pedestrians with white-gloved hands. The whistle was the sound of authority, and everyone obeyed it. "Extra! Extra! Read all about it!"
The newsboys were everywhere in 1920s cities, some as young as 8 years old, shouting headlines in high, piercing voices. They competed for attention, each one trying to outshout the others. Yankees win, Babe Ruth hits 2, stock market reaches new high. Their voices are urgency personified. Beneath it all runs the constant rumble of the streetcar, that electric hum and metallic screech. The bell goes clang, clang, clang as it approaches intersections. The doors open with a hydraulic hiss. The conductor shouts, "All aboard!" and the cycle repeats, block after block.
Step inside a 1920s office building, and you enter a completely different acoustic environment. The dominant sound is one that's almost extinct today, the clatter of mechanical typewriters. In a large typing pool, 50 or more secretaries, almost all women, would sit at identical desks, fingers flying over the keys. Each keystroke produces a distinct clack. Each carriage return creates a ching, followed by the zip of the carriage sliding back. Multiply this by 50 typewriters, all going at once, and you have a rhythm section unlike anything in the modern world. Listen to the telephone system. By the 1920s, phones were common in offices, but they worked differently. When someone called, a bell would ring, loud and mechanical. Operators would plug cables into switchboards with satisfying click sounds. And the conversations themselves had a different quality, tinny and distant, compressed through primitive copper wires. Down on the street, at the lunch counter, the sounds are deliciously mundane, but utterly period-specific. The soda jerk pulls the lever on the fountain with a pssh of carbonation. Milkshakes are mixed in metal containers, the beaters creating a high-pitched whir. Plates clatter on marble counters. The cash register rings up sales with a distinctive ka-ching as the drawer springs open. "Shoe shine, get your shoes shined, mister." The shoe shine boys work their brushes in rapid snaps against leather, creating a percussive rhythm. The pop of the shine cloth is like a tiny whip crack. In the department stores, the pneumatic tube systems whoosh overhead, carrying money and receipts from sales floor to accounting office. The revolving doors create their own music, a constant swish, swish, swish as shoppers enter and exit. America in the 1920s was an industrial powerhouse, and nowhere was this more evident than in the factories that dominated city landscapes. These were loud, dangerous, visceral places. The assembly line, perfected by Henry Ford, created its own mechanical symphony. Conveyor belts rumbled, pneumatic tools hissed and hammered, metal stamped against metal with thunderous precision. Workers shouted to be heard over the din. This was the sound of mass production, the sound of the American manufacturing miracle. Listen to the rivet guns on construction sites. In the 1920s, cities were growing upward. Skyscrapers were rising in New York, Chicago, and other major cities. Workers called riveters would heat metal rivets until they glowed red, then drive them into steel beams with compressed air guns. The sound was like rapid-fire machine gun bursts, echoing off the steel frameworks of buildings reaching toward the sky. In the railroad yards, steam locomotives dominated. The hiss of steam being released, the chuff, chuff, chuff of pistons driving wheels, the screech of metal wheels on metal rails, and above all, the whistle. Each locomotive's whistle had a distinct tone, a voice that could be heard for miles, announcing arrivals, departures, and warnings. The printing presses that produced newspapers, magazines, and books created a rhythmic thunder. Massive rollers turned, paper fed through at incredible speeds, creating a whoosh and rumble that made the floor vibrate.
the smell of ink mixed with the industrial symphony.
Not everything in 1920s America was work and industry. The decade was called Roaring for a reason. This was the age of entertainment, leisure, and the pursuit of pleasure. Step into a baseball stadium on a summer afternoon. This was the golden age of baseball, the era of Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. The crack of the bat connecting with the ball is sharp and clean. The crowd roars with a sound that's timeless, tens of thousands of voices rising as one. But listen to the vendors. "Peanuts! Get your peanuts here! Ice-cold soda pop!" Their calls create a melodic counterpoint to the game. In the city parks, children play games we've almost forgotten. You hear the thwack of a stick against a ball in stickball games. Jump ropes slap against pavement in rhythmic patterns while girls chant rhymes. Marbles click and clack. These simple sounds represented the entire entertainment universe for many children before electronic toys. The ice cream vendor pushes his cart, a bell ringing to announce his presence. It's a gentle, inviting sound that would bring children running from blocks away. And there, on the corner, a barbershop quartet harmonizes. 4 men in striped jackets and straw boater hats, singing in perfect 4-part harmony. In the good old summertime. Their voices blend and soar, creating overtones and undertones, a purely acoustic wonder that needs no amplification, no electronics, just the human voice in perfect unity.
As evening falls, the city transforms. This is when the 1920s truly earned the name the Jazz Age. And nothing, absolutely nothing, defines the sound of this era more than jazz. You approach a nondescript door in an alley. 3 knocks. A slot opens. You whisper the password. The door swings open and you're hit with a wave of sound, the wail of a trumpet, the thump of an upright bass, the shimmer of a snare drum brushed with wire brushes, and above it all, a piano dancing through a complex, syncopated melody. This is jazz in its purest, most revolutionary form. Louis Armstrong is blowing his cornet in Chicago. Duke Ellington is leading his orchestra in Harlem's Cotton Club. The music is alive, improvisational, dangerous, and utterly intoxicating. Listen to the trumpet, how it bends notes, slides, growls, and sings like a human voice. The clarinet weaves around it, rapid and fluid. The trombone adds its voice, sliding between notes in a way classical music never allowed. And underneath it all, the rhythm section, banjo or guitar strumming in percussive chops, the bass walking its line, and the drums driving everything forward with a swagger that makes it impossible to stand still. On the dance floor, flappers and their beaux dance the Charleston. You can hear their feet hitting the floor in syncopated stomps, the swish of fringe on dresses, the breathless laughter between songs. And there, in the corner, a woman in a sequined dress steps up to the microphone. The room quiets slightly. She begins to sing, her voice raw and powerful, bending notes with emotional precision. This is the birth of a new American art form happening right now, in this moment.
By the mid-1920s, a new sound was entering American homes, a sound that would change everything. Radio. For the first time in human history, you could sit in your living room in Des Moines, Iowa, and hear live music from New York City. You could hear news as it happened. You could hear stories, comedy, drama, all transmitted through the air like magic. Listen to the quality of the sound. Early radio had a distinct character, slightly distorted, compressed, with a narrow frequency range that made voices sound tinny, yet oddly intimate. The announcer speaks with exaggerated clarity.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is station KDKA, broadcasting from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The variety shows featured live orchestras, singers, comedians, and sound effects artists. These effects artists were geniuses, creating entire worlds with simple props. Coconut shells clapped together made horse hooves. A sheet of metal shaken created thunder. Crumpling cellophane sounded like fire. Footsteps on different surfaces, doors opening and closing, all performed live in real time. Families would gather around the radio in the evening, the warm glow of the tubes lighting their faces. Children sat cross-legged on the floor. Parents settled into chairs, and together they listened, imagining the worlds being created in their minds through sound alone. This was the beginning of broadcast media, the start of a revolution that would lead to television, the internet, and everything we know today. But in 1925, it was pure wonder, a miracle of science, bringing the world into your home.
As midnight approaches, the city doesn't sleep, but it slows. It breathes differently. The traffic thins. Individual sounds become more distinct. A taxicab rattles down the street, its engine echoing off building facades. The driver leans on the horn, auga, looking for late-night fares. In the all-night diner, the sounds are sparse and crisp. A coffee cup sets down on a saucer with a delicate clink. The cook scrapes the griddle clean. The door opens, a bell jingles, and a weary factory worker takes a stool at the counter. "Coffee, black," he says, his voice rough with exhaustion. The night watchman makes his rounds, his footsteps echoing in empty streets. Every hour he pulls a lever on a special clock box, recording his patrol. The mechanism makes a satisfying chunk as it registers. Listen carefully to the quiet. This is something our modern world has almost entirely lost. In 1925, after midnight, large portions of the city actually achieved something close to silence. No highway traffic, no air conditioners humming, no jets overhead, just the occasional sound punctuating the stillness. A cat yowls in an alley. A distant train whistle echoes across the city. A window opens somewhere, and for just a moment you hear a phonograph playing softly, someone unable to sleep, finding comfort in music. The neon signs buzz and flicker, their transformers creating a low electrical hum. These lights were new, exciting, turning night into day in the entertainment districts, but even they seem subdued now, their glow more gentle than garish. We've traveled through a full day in a 1920s American city, from dawn to deep night. We've heard sounds that no longer exist, voices that have been silent for nearly a century, and music that revolutionized the world. So what happened to these sounds? Where did they go? Many simply became obsolete. The horse gave way to the automobile, which itself evolved from a sputtering mechanical marvel to a quiet, efficient machine. Streetcars were replaced by buses and subways. Mechanical typewriters gave way to electric ones, then computers, now mostly smartphones. Factory whistles fell silent as work patterns changed. Newsboys vanished when newspapers began home delivery and eventually digital distribution. But some sounds evolved rather than disappeared. Jazz didn't die, it transformed into swing, bebop, cool jazz, and influenced every form of American music that followed. The radio became more sophisticated, leading to television and streaming media. The human voice remains, though now we hear it through earbuds rather than in barbershop quartets on street corners. And some sounds we've lost entirely, perhaps to our detriment. The actual quiet of a city night, the communal experience of gathering around a radio, the organic chaos of a street market, the craftsmanship sounds of individual work before mass automation.
These recordings and recreations are more than nostalgia. They're a reminder that every era has its own acoustic signature, its own rhythm and melody. Our great-grandparents lived in a world that sounded fundamentally different from ours. And 100 years from now, the sounds we take for granted, the hum of computers, the chime of notifications, the whir of electric cars, these too will be forgotten, replaced by sounds we can't yet imagine. But for now, we've had the privilege of listening through the walls of time, of hearing the everyday symphony of an extraordinary decade. The 1920s didn't just look different, it sounded different, it felt different. And for 20 minutes, we've been able to step into that world and hear it come alive again. Thank you for joining us on this sonic journey. This has been Unearthing Forgotten Sounds, a 1920s bustling American city. Until next time, keep listening. The past has so much to tell us if only we take the time to hear it.